Look, I don't know what dragged you in here tonight. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe you're running on fumes. Or maybe, just maybe, you've been convinced that you've crossed some invisible line you can't come back from. But let me tell you something raw and real. You're not too far gone. Yeah, I said it. Not with fake hope. Not with fluffy words. I mean, really? You're not out of reach? You ever been in a place so dark you start thinking, God's done with me? This is who I am now. This is permanent. Nah, that's shame talking, not truth. And shame, it's a terrible preacher. It'll tell you your story's over when God's just getting started. Let me break it down. You don't fix yourself, then show up. You show up as you are, and grace does the fixing. People love to act like you gotta be perfect to be loved. Let me wreck that idea. Grace ain't scared of your mess. Matter of fact, it runs toward it. You know why? Because your past doesn't scare grace. Your secrets don't shock it. Your failures don't cancel it. I've seen junkies turn into leaders. I've seen cheaters become faithful. I've seen broken people hold others together. Because grace reached further than the wreckage. You think you're the one case grace can't handle? Get over yourself. You're not that powerful. You can't out-sin the reach of a love that already took nails for you. If you're at rock bottom right now, good. That's the perfect place for a comeback. The dirt you're buried in, it might just be the soil where something holy starts to grow. So listen to me and hear me for real. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to earn it. You just got to receive it. Let grace crash through your doubt. Let it wreck your pride. Let it pull you out of whatever pit you've been calling home. Because you're not too far gone. Not now. Not ever. Grace reaches further. And tonight, it's reaching for you. No one is beyond redemption, no matter the mess. That's not just a cute line you slap on a t-shirt. That's truth. The kind that flips tables and shatters the silence you've been sitting in. Because let's be honest, some of you out here walking around like you've already been disqualified. Like there's some scoreboard up in the sky tallying every wrong move you ever made. And you've already racked up too many falls to get back in the game. But let me set the record straight. You are not your worst moment. You are not the worst thing you've done. I don't care how ugly it got. I don't care who walked out on you or who said you'd never change. That might be their opinion, but that's not the verdict, because redemption doesn't have a cut-off date. It doesn't expire just because you crossed some imaginary line. Redemption is still in play as long as you've got breath in your lungs. Some people think redemption is for the good people who messed up a little. Like there's some ranking system where you're only worth saving if your mistakes are mild, polite, socially acceptable. But let me ask you this. Who did grace show up for? The clean or the ones knee deep in disaster? If redemption was only for the ones who almost had it together, none of us would stand a chance. You think the people who got rescued in the stories you've heard were perfect? No. They were liars, thieves, addicts, broken, angry, scared out of their minds. They weren't just people who made a mistake. They were the mistake according to everyone else. And yet, they were the ones who got picked up, carried, changed. See, the world says you're damaged goods. The world keeps a list. The world says you had your shot. But grace? Grace tears up the list. Grace doesn't keep score like that. Grace isn't checking your reputation, your background, or your highlight reel. It's looking at your heart. And when grace sees you drowning, it doesn't say, you should have learned to swim. It jumps in and says, let's get out of here. And yeah, some of y'all feel stuck because people around you keep bringing up who you used to be. They keep dragging your name through the mud of your past like that's all you'll ever be. But you know what? Their memory doesn't define your identity. Redemption doesn't ask them for permission. It doesn't need a crowd to co-sign your second chance. It shows up in silence and works loud, real loud. The kind of loud that wakes your spirit up and shakes chains off. You think your mess disqualifies you. Let me flip that. It's the exact reason grace shows up. Redemption walks into the middle of your disaster and says, I choose you anyway. That means you don't have to edit your story. You don't have to pretend it didn't get that bad. You can be real about the wreckage because that's where grace does its best work. In the dirt, in the dirt. In the forgotten corners where everyone else gave up. And listen, if you think your pain, your shame or your past is too heavy for redemption to carry, let me remind you, it already carried a cross heavier than anything you're holding. Now wait, it's not too much. Not even close. You're not the exception. You're not the one mistake grace didn't see coming. You're not the glitch in the system. You're the reason it exists. So no, you're not too far gone. Not even a little. You're right on time for a turnaround. You haven't messed up too bad, drifted too far, or stayed stuck too long. There's still time. There's still hope. There's still a hand reaching into your story, not to judge it, but to rewrite it. Not to erase your past, but to redeem it, to take the pieces and make something out of them that people said was impossible. Because no one, not even you, is beyond redemption, no matter how deep the pit, no matter how dark the night. Redemption reaches. And tonight, it's reaching for you. Shame is loud, but grace shouts louder. That's not just something to make you feel better. It's reality. Shame has a voice, and it's ruthless. It speaks in your own tone, in your own head. It knows exactly when to show up, right when you're trying to move forward. Right when you take one step toward healing, she's that voice that says, you really think people would accept you if they knew? Or remember what you did? You don't deserve another shot. And it doesn't whisper, it yells. It repeats over and over until you start believing it's the truth. That's the trick. Shame doesn't need facts. It just needs volume. It twists memory. It twists memory. It weaponizes your past. It'll take something you did 5 years ago and make it feel like you did it 5 minutes ago. It'll walk into a moment that's supposed to be good, like reconciliation, restoration, or peace, and throw dirt all over it. You try to feel clean, and shame throws the stain back in your face. And if you've lived with that long enough, you start to think shame is part of your identity, like it's stitched into your name, like it's your shadow. But here's what shame doesn't want you to know grace is louder. Grace doesn't argue with shame. It doesn't play the same game. It walks in and shuts the whole show down. It doesn't yell to compete. It speaks with authority. And when something real speaks, everything else goes silent. Grace doesn't need to explain itself. It just is. And when it speaks, shame has no choice but to back down. See, the thing about shame is that it's rooted in the lie that you are what you've done. It attaches your identity to your mistake. But grace comes in and detaches that lie. It says, you did that, yeah, but you are not that. Shame says, you're broken. Grace says, you're chosen. Shame says, you'll never change. Grace says, I'll walk with you until you do. You feel that shift? That's power. That's not motivational talk. That's truth cutting through the noise. Shame isolates. It makes you want to hide. That's why some of you have been walking around with your head down for years. That's why you don't speak up. That's why you don't show up. You think if people really saw you, they'd reject you. You think if God really knew, he'd turn away. But listen, he already bit of us. Every stuff you don't say out loud, the parts that make your stomach twist. And yet, grace still shows up with open arms. Not just accepting you, but wanting you. That's what makes grace so loud. It keeps showing up every morning. Every time you think you've gone too far, it interrupts the cycle. That moment when shame starts up again, trying to take the mick, grace steps in and speaks louder. You're still mine. You're still loved. You're still covered. And the crazy thing, grace doesn't deny what you've done. It's not delusional. It doesn't need to erase the past to redeem the future. Grace looks shame in the face and says, I know exactly what they did, and I still say they're worth it. That kind of loud, that kind of fierce, unrelenting love. Shame can't compete with that. It'll try. It'll come back. But every single time, grace will outspeak it. You may have believed for years that shame was your truth, that if people saw the real you, they'd run. But grace sees the real you and runs toward you. Grace says, I see your dirt, and I still call you clean. Grace sees your record and stamps it paid. Grace doesn't cancel you, it covers you. So yeah, shame's loud, but grace doesn't just whisper in the background hoping you'll notice. Grace shouts louder, louder than your history, louder than your inner critic, louder than every lie shame ever told you. You don't have to stay quiet anymore. You don't have to shrink to fit the shame that's been choking your joy. Let grace speak. Let it echo through every dark hallway shame tried to trap you in, because grace isn't scared of the noise. It came to silence it. And tonight, it's speaking over you, louder than the guilt, louder than the fear, than the shame. And it's saying one thing: you are still loved. You don't clean up to come home. You come home to get clean. That's one of the biggest lies, people believing that you have to fix yourself before you're allowed to show up. Like there's some checklist you've got to complete before you can belong again. Once I stop messing up, then I'll go back. Once I break the habit, once I change, once I become someone new, then maybe I'll be worthy. But here's the truth. Home was never about being worthy. It was always about being wanted. And that doesn't change just because you're dirty. Some of y'all have been living outside for way too long, thinking you've got to scrub yourself clean before the door opens. You think you need to act perfect, sound perfect, look the part. You're trying to present this version of yourself that isn't even real, just so you can feel accepted. But deep down, you're still carrying the same guilt, the same weight, the same junk that's been slowing you down for years. Let's be real. How long are you going to keep trying to fix a heart with broken tools? It doesn't work like that. You don't get cleaned up outside and then come in. You walk in as you are. Mud on your boots. Ashes on your hands. You walk in broken, bruised, limping if you have to. You come in smelling like smoke and failure. And still, grace wraps its arms around you like you're royalty. That's the home you've been avoiding. The home where healing actually happens. You ever see a little kid fall into mud? They don't say, "Let me find a way to clean this off before I go tell mom." No. They run straight home, mess and all, because they know home is where the cleanup happens. They trust they won't be rejected. They trust there's someone waiting who knows how to handle the mess. Somewhere along the line, you lost that instinct. Somewhere shame taught you that the mess makes you unlovable. But let me tell you, it's the mess that makes grace matter. If you were already clean, you wouldn't need it. The dirt doesn't disqualify you. It draws you closer to the one who can make you whole. Stop waiting to become someone you're not just to be accepted. That version of you, the one with no flaws, no struggles, no slip-ups, it doesn't exist. And trying to fake that version is what's making you feel even more distant. That's what religion without relationship will do. It'll have you out here pretending, performing, wearing a mask while your soul suffocates. But grace rips the mask off and says, "Come home anyway." And let me tell you, coming home doesn't mean everything magically changes overnight. This isn't a fairy tale. It's not a snap your fingers and you're fixed kind of story. But it's the start of something. It's the moment the healing begins. When you walk in, you're not met with judgment. You're met with water and a towel. You're not met with lectures. You're met with love. You're not handed a list of things to improve. You're handed a place at the table. You've been out in the cold for too long. You've been trying to clean yourself up with shame and self-hate. But those things don't wash you, they wear you down. Grace doesn't need you to have it all together. It just needs you to come home. To say, "I'm tired of trying to fix this on my own." That's where everything changes. The ones who came home in the stories that matter, they came home dirty, they came home dragging guilt, regret, all of it. And yet, every time, home welcomed them, grace cleaned them, love restored them. That's the pattern. That's the promise. You don't wait to get clean to be loved. You come in loved, and that love starts to clean what shame tried to hide. So hear this. If you're waiting until you're good enough to come back, stop. That day doesn't exist. But today does. Right now does. And grace is standing at the door, not asking questions, not checking records, just saying one thing: come home. Let me handle the rest. You don't clean up to come home. You come home to get cleaned. And tonight, the door is wide open. Rock bottom is where grace does its finest work. That's not just a comfort line for people going through hell. It's the truth. It's real. Because you don't really understand what grace is until you've got nothing else left to lean on. When you're at the end of yourself, when the mask has cracked, the pride is gone, and everything you built on your own strength has crumbled, that's when grace steps in and says, "Now, let me show you what I can do." See, everyone's scared of rock bottom. We avoid it. We hate the sound of it. We act like it's a curse. But the thing about hitting the bottom is this: it wakes you up. When you're flat on your back, the only direction left to look is up. That's where a shift happens, not when everything's going great, not when you've got control, but when you finally realize you don't. Rock bottom strips you. It breaks the illusion. It takes the filters off and makes things raw and real. And guess what? Grace thrives in that kind of space. You want to know where miracles really start? It's not in the spotlight. It's not on the mountaintop. It's in the mud, in the silence, in the place where you think there's no way out. That's where grace rolls up its sleeves and goes to work. When you're done pretending, when the applause fades, when the people you counted on disappear, and it's just you and your mess, that's when grace whispers, "Good, now we're ready." Because grace isn't intimidated by rock bottom. It's drawn to it. You think you fell too far? Grace goes further. You think you're too broken? Grace says, "Watch this." That's the thing. Rock bottom doesn't scare grace. It attracts it. You think you lost everything. That's where grace starts building. You think your story is over. Grace turns the page. You think you're too far gone. Grace says, "Perfect. Now I can really show off. Let's get one thing straight. Rock bottom isn't punishment. It's a pivot point. It's a place where heaven crashes into your disaster. And the craziest part, that broken space you're in right now might be the most fertile ground your life has ever seen. You think you're buried, but maybe, just maybe, you've been planted. And grace is about to make something grow out of that soil. And listen, don't believe the lie that says being at the bottom means you're weak. You know what it actually means? It means you're done faking. It means you're finally honest. It means you're human enough to admit, I can't do this on my own. And that's where strength begins, not in self-reliance, but in surrender. That's the moment grace kicks the door in and starts rewriting the ending. Some of you are scared to admit you've hit the bottom. You're scared of what people will think. You're scared it makes you a failure. But let me tell you, some of the strongest people you know didn't get there by winning. They got there by surviving rock bottom and finding grace in the rubble. They got there because they stopped trying to be perfect and started letting grace do what only grace can do: restore, redeem, rebuild. It's okay to be at the end of yourself. It's okay to say, I'm not okay. You're not weak for breaking. You're not hopeless for struggling. You're not ruined because you hit the floor. You're just finally in the place where grace can work without competition, where your performance is done and your healing can begin. So don't fear rock bottom. Don't run from it, because the same place that looks like defeat might be the exact place God has marked for your comeback. Grace doesn't just visit the bottom, it lives there, waiting, ready, willing to meet you where you are and carry you where you never thought you could go. If you're at the bottom right now, hear me when I say this: you are not finished. You are not forgotten. You are not beyond reach. Rock bottom is where grace does its finest work. And you're right on time. Healing doesn't start when you feel strong. It starts when you admit you're not. That's the real beginning. That's where the process finally kicks in, not when you've got a plan, not when you've got your emotions figured out, not when you're motivated and ready to run. No. Healing starts in that messy, quiet moment when you say, I'm not okay. That's the door. That's the key. That's the turning point. See, we live in a world that celebrates toughness. Keep it together. Keep smiling. Keep pretending everything's fine. You could be falling apart inside, but if you can fake strong on the outside, people call it resilience. But let's be real. It's not strength. It's survival. And survival is not the same thing as healing. You can survive for years and still be bleeding on the inside. You can function and still be fractured. Some of you have been walking around with wounds you've never acknowledged, acting like they're scars just because time passed. But time doesn't heal if truth never enters. You've got to be honest. That's where grace meets you, not in the performance, not in the presentation, in the confession, in the raw, unfiltered, I can't do this anymore. That's when things begin to change. It's backwards, I know, because we think healing requires strength. We think we have to clean it up first, smile through the pain, keep quiet until we have a testimony. That sounds good. But grace doesn't need a polished story. It needs an honest one. It meets you in the middle of your breakdown and says, let's start here. That weakness you're trying to hide, that's the spot where grace will pour in. You're not disqualified because you're broken. You're not less valuable because you're struggling. That feeling of not having it all together, that's not failure. It's the first real step toward freedom. Healing is not about being impressive. It's about being honest. And that takes more courage than faking strong ever will. Let me tell you, when you finally stop pretending, something powerful happens. That weight you've been carrying starts to shift. Because healing isn't just about what's happening on the outside. It's about finally being known fully. The real you. The hurting, confused, tired, scared version of you. The version that's been screaming behind the scenes. Grace meets that you and says, I've been waiting for you to stop pretending. You don't have to earn healing. You don't have to deserve it. You just have to let it in. And sometimes letting it in means falling apart in front of someone who won't flinch, someone who won't walk away when they see the mess. And that's what grace does. It stays. It sits with you in the ashes. It doesn't rush you to the finish line. It doesn't slap a band-aid on a bullet wound. It gives you space. It gives you time. And it gives you love that doesn't shift with your performance. And let's not get it twisted. Healing isn't pretty. It's not linear. It doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like crying on the floor again. Sometimes it looks like facing the same wound for the 10th time. Sometimes it feels like going backward. But healing isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about showing up for yourself again and again and again, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And maybe you're scared that if you stop pretending to be strong, everything will fall apart. But maybe the fall is where the rebuild starts. Maybe letting go of the fake version of strength is how you get free. Because grace doesn't ask for a cleaned up version of you. It asks for the real you, the broken one, the burdened one, the tired one. And hear me, healing doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. It means the hurt won't own you anymore. It means the pain won't be the one steering your decisions. It means you can breathe again, laugh again, dream again. Because the moment you say, I'm not okay, is the moment grace whispers, good. Let's start the healing. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to be honest. You don't need strength to be healed. You need surrender. And right now, that's more than enough. There's no such thing as too far gone. That's a lie shame made up to keep you stuck. It's not real. It sounds final, like a door slammed shut forever, like your worst mistake gets the last word, but it doesn't. Grace rewrites endings. Grace breaks locks. Grace kicks down doors you thought would never open again. The moment you believe you're too far gone is the moment you stop looking for hope. And that's exactly what shame wants. Because if you stop looking, you won't find out the truth. You're not lost forever. You're just lost right now. Some people walk around with this silent sentence hanging over their life, like they're marked, like they missed their shot. I had my chance. I blew it. That was my moment and I wrecked it. So they settle, they survive, they shut down. They tell themselves not to dream anymore because they think the damage is permanent. But listen, grace doesn't operate on your timeline, doesn't stop showing up just because you stop believing. You might be done with you, but grace isn't. You could be standing in the ruins of everything you broke and think, this is where it ends. But grace walks into that same mess and says, this is where we begin. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't hold a clipboard and start checking off how many wrongs you did. It walks right up to your wreckage, gets on its knees, and starts rebuilding with you. And you're sitting there, hands in your head, thinking, why would grace waste time on me? And grace simply says, because I never left, too far gone. According to who? Because last time I checked, the same grace that showed up for the addict shows up for the liar. The same grace that lifted the criminal lifts the broken-hearted. The same grace that carried the person with nothing left is the same grace that can carry you. There are no categories with grace. It doesn't rank sins. It doesn't compare stories. It just says, if you're breathing, you're not done. If you're here, there's still hope. The problem is we measure ourselves by our worst days. We define ourselves by the worst version of us. You hear things like, you're not good enough, you're damaged, or you'll never change, and you take those words like they're gospel, but they're not. They're lies. Lies you've heard so often you started repeating them yourself. But even if you gave up on you, grace hasn't. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't ignore the damage. It doesn't pretend your choices didn't have weight. Grace just refuses to let your past have more authority than your future. You don't have to ignore what you've done to believe something better is possible. You just have to stop thinking what you did disqualifies you from being loved, redeemed, and restored. Because here's the truth, every single one of us has stood in that too far gone space. Maybe it looked different, maybe it sounded different, but the feeling was the same, empty, ashamed, stuck. You're not alone in that. You're not the exception. You're not the one person grace can't reach. The fact that you're even reading this, that breath in your chest, that means there's still a shot. There's still a way. You're not at the end. You're at the middle. What if the worst thing you ever did wasn't the end of your story? What if it's the part grace uses to show how deep love can really go? That's what grace does. It doesn't erase the pain. It uses it. It turns your scars into stories. It takes what tried to bury you and turns it into something that blooms. That's not hype. That's not fairy tale. That's truth. You are not too far gone. Not because you've done everything right, but because grace goes further than failure, further than guilt, further than regret, further than every should've and what if. You don't need to climb your way back to some perfect version of yourself to be worthy of healing. You just need to stop believing the lie that you're beyond reach. Because you're not. Grace has been chasing you this whole time. Not because you're perfect, but because you're loved. And love doesn't leave. Love doesn't quit. Love doesn't say, that's too far. It says, that's exactly where I'm going. You are not too far gone. You've just been running from a grace that refuses to give up. But tonight you can stop running. Because grace is already here.